Hello and welcome to The Appointment. I am Pranjal Sharma. Joining me today for a conversation is the new president of the Confederation of Indian Industry, Naushad Forbes. Naushad, thanks so much for joining us today, and congratulations for your new assignment and responsibility. You're taking over the leading chamber of industry at a time where hope is improved. There seem to be some traction building on the ground on industrial activity. May I begin by asking you to share your impression of where is the Indian economy today?
So, Pranjal, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you. And I think the economy is in a very good place. And the timing is, I think, very exciting for me personally. Because I think if you look, we're sort of at the, this is the middle year of the government in a sense. Of the 5-year term.
Maybe halfway through the term.
Almost. So it's so 2 years are up. This is the middle year, and then there'll be 2 years, which will be a run up to the next election, and so on. And I think this is the timing is great for two reasons. One is from an Indian government perspective. There's a lot of there are many schemes underway. We've seen many useful things happen. Many more useful things are in the pipeline. And there's a great receptivity to working on new areas and finding new ways of pushing growth. Second, it's a great opportunity and timing from the international perspective. Yes, one could argue that there's a lot of stress internationally, but when the world is doing well and all economies are doing well, it's very difficult to stand out. When most economies around the world are struggling, or at best, keeping their heads above water, right? Then when you have a strong growth rate of 7.5%, 8%, that you really stand out. I think it's a great timing.
How much of the optimism that we've seen in the last few months and the attention that we're getting from global investors, how much of that is now converting into action now, Naushad, on the ground where you see the wheels of the industry spinning faster?
So from the foreign investment perspective, we've already seen the action start to happen. Foreign investment is up about 30% on the previous year. So we're starting to see some of these strong signs that the Make in India campaign is starting to deliver. I'm told also that this 30% increase in foreign investment, the share of manufacturing related foreign investment has grown significantly. That to me is also very encouraging, because it says again that India is being seen as an attractive investment destination, not just for services, but for manufacturing as well. That's new, and that's to me a very powerful indicator.
And it's also that the manufacturing base has expanded to include new sectors like defense and aerospace.
Yes.
It's early days, but that seems to be good too.
Very much so. Very much so. Defense, aerospace, announcement in the last budget about food processing. These are whole new sectors which can actually attract a large foreign interest. But I think the area that we need to still work on is domestic investment, because domestic investment is still subdued. It's going to wait until demand picks up. I think first existing capacity has to be utilized. The capacity that's been created and improved on in the last few years, that has to still be utilized as demand picks up. And then probably maybe through this year, towards the end of the year, we'll start seeing a pickup in the investment cycle again. And that will then get all parts of the economy moving in the right direction.
Here, I think the two obstacles to industrial activity were lack of consumer demand and high cost of credit. And it seems that both seem to be a reduced problem today.
Exactly.
So do you see momentum picking up?
So both are moderating, and we see momentum picking up. Exactly. So we're starting to see demand grow in the aggregate in certain sectors. Some of it driven very directly through initiatives of the government. For example, investment in the road building program, where we're seeing orders flow through for example, construction equipment companies. And that kind of trigger is helping demand grow more broadly. The initiatives announced in the budget of investment in the rural sector are yet to show up on the ground in terms of demand growing from the rural sector, but it's a matter of time. It's been a month.
There, I think the government is now focusing on investing in agriculture, which has been, sorely neglected. We don't have enough investment in agriculture for last 45 years. So I think that would make a lot of difference. But in terms of the issues which were holding back the momentum and the energy of Indian industry, the high cost of credit and the rising debt was an issue. Do you see a constructive approach to resolving this issue of bad debt, which will free up a lot of capital as well as entrepreneurial energy?
So I think the move to get banks to recognize the non-performing assets on their books is in itself a very productive thing, because once you recognize the problem, you provide for it, you can then move on and get beyond it. We've also recommended, and there's been, as you know, a lot of discussion on the creation of a national asset asset restructuring company, which would essentially, a bad bank that would essentially take these non-performing loans off the books of existing banks. It's been done in some other countries. It's maybe a way of speeding up the process, but regardless of whether one goes that route or not, simply addressing the overhang of non-performing assets, which has begun now, is very productive. I think it's important to do and get beyond.
It's also going to create a sense of discipline in the industry, which some of them were, perhaps too ebullient about managing projects, but they were perhaps not capable of running them.
Well, I think some of it was too ebullient and having greater confidence in one's abilities than was warranted. But some of it was also caused by delays that were beyond the company's own control, particularly on the infrastructure side, particularly on many of the PPP projects that were awarded. They were awarded, but the government didn't deliver on its own
the financial closures were delayed, and as a result, it hurt everybody. Naushad, you give us a very good insight into the fact that things are beginning to look up and things are moving on the ground. At the level of states, which is where the real action is, the central government has devolved a lot of funds to them, given them freedom to utilize funds, and so they have a better ability to engage with private sector. Where do you see the reforms and changes at the regional level? What are the best changes that are happening? So,
I think one of the most positive developments of the last 2 years has been a true unleashing of competitive federalism. As states have started to compete one with the other.
Is it more than a slogan?
I think it's very much more than a slogan. Let me give you two examples. First, take the area of labor reform. Labor reform is a very contentious issue. It was first raised by Manmohan Singh when he was finance minister. There was a lot of criticism. The issue ended up being dropped, and it vanished from the policy agenda for over 20 years. Right?
And we are in the 25 year of economic reforms.
Absolutely, right? It was finally picked up again by this government, and I think it was courageous that the government picked it up. They realized too that doing anything substantial on the labor reform side at the central government level was going to be very difficult. So they said quite cleverly, I think, that look, this is a concurrent issue. It's an issue where the states can move ahead if they wish, right? And they, as the central government, would approve the changes that they wanted. They encouraged states to move ahead on their own labor reforms, and we've seen 5 states move and change their labor laws. So Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal, which you would never have thought would be in a labor reform short list of states, have all moved on their
So when
on
you
their
see
labor reforms.
these changes are very welcome, because I think one of the best things is, instead of the center deciding everything for everybody, the states are taking ownership of these changes, which is also politically more tenable. When do you see this impact affecting projects on the ground?
So, we as a company track projects around the country, and one of the things that struck us is that in the last year or so, the overwhelming proportion of moving projects that are in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. And it's a question, how come Telangana and Andhra Pradesh? I mean, they always had good project activity, but why this disproportionate representation? And it's because of a particularly fierce competition that's taking place between the new state of Andhra Pradesh and the new state of Telangana to attract investment and to move forward in a whole range of sectors. I'll give you a great example of competitive federalism there. The state of Andhra Pradesh announced a very proactive policy where they said, look, if you're waiting for an approval and you don't get it in 21 days, then you can consider the approval to have been granted. It's deemed to be approved. The state of Telangana went one better and they said, look, 21 days, it's deemed to be granted, and the bureaucrat who was sitting on that approval will be fined. So, I mean, to me, it's a good example of competitive federalism.
And I think also accountability.
And accountability. I mean, states are starting to push the decision-making down and say, how do we actually deliver change on the ground? And I think that's very powerful.
There has been a lot of debate about the impact of National Skills Development Corporation. There's a skills ministry in the government today. What are the learnings from the efforts so far which can help us really make sure that A, the skill creation is of a certain quality, and B, to ensure that is taken into the industry, because there seems to be a gap there?
I agree. I think we're poised to see a lot of change there at two levels, and both areas are both deliverables for us as a part of our theme this year. First, in terms of the Skills Development Corporation has worked on, I think it's about 350 different skills, where they have identified different levels within those skills and said, look, how do you become a better, and this is a range of skills. This is how do you become a better cook, how do you become a better waiter, how do you become a better person who cleans your house, and also how do you become a better machinist on the shop floor. So it's a huge range of skills, and that framework is now all done. It needs to be effectively deployed and taken up on a widespread basis by corporate India. And I think that's where we need to play a much more proactive role. It has to move. It has to move.
I think the ownership of corporate India on these efforts needs to sort of rise to a better level.
I think we can take much greater advantage of it. The government passed a new Apprenticeship Act a year and a half ago. It's quite a fundamentally new act. It provides great flexibility in hiring apprentices. It moves away from having all these specified percentages, that if you have 100 turners, then you must have 5 turners as apprentices. You can now mix and match in terms of your apprentices as you like, covering all fields, including services. It provides great flexibility. Those notifications from the state governments are still flowing out. Even a year and a half later, it's something that needs to be hastened so that this can become reality on the ground. But from companies as well, we should be displaying, it seems to me, a lot more eagerness to take advantage of the flexibility that this new act provides, because it's a great advantage. It'll help us in our own firms in training people that will be good for our companies and good for everyone else.
That's fuel and engine for your growth. Naushad, from the states, I want to pick up some of these issues around entrepreneurial culture in India, and that seems to be looking very robust, dynamic, exciting. The government seems to be stepping in, but we've seen that the entrepreneurial spirit of India is best left to animal spirits and the talent of the young people. How much of it is diversified enough? Because the sense one gets is that it's most of it which gets attention is in the technology sector, but perhaps this should be more broad-based. What's your view on this?
I do think it should be more broad-based, but I fully agree with you on the vibrancy of our entrepreneurial culture. I think we have a tremendously entrepreneurial culture, and I think, in fact, the whole purpose of reform, that started off in 1991, has really been to enable the entrepreneurial culture of India to achieve what it's capable of doing. I think that shows up in many sectors of the economy. The startup environment is particularly vibrant in services and in tech. There are many opportunities there, and we can talk about the potential, for example, of e-commerce to really provide a whole new whole new paradigms of how business can be done in India. But
here, the role of an organization like CII is critical, because one of the inputs they're lacking is mentoring or guidance, because they have a great idea. They seem to get funds pretty easily, but it's a bit like spray the money and pray that something works. So, helping them realize their objective, can CII play a role?
So one of the things that we're consciously trying to do is to actually first try to include many of these new sectors in our own membership and in our own activities, because that, the first there needs to be contact. Right, and when there's contact, then we can provide the kind of connections that can be very productive for people who have all of the ideas and all of the talent and all of the energy, but perhaps need some of that input in terms of connections with the rest of the more mainstream, if you like, economy. But just to take the advantage of e-commerce really in the country, in many other countries, e-commerce provides a marginal and incremental benefit. You mean instead of something being delivered to your doorstep in 3 days, it comes in 3 hours. That's not transformative. It's nice, but it's not transformative. In India, probably now, someone can get something which they earlier couldn't get. At all. So that's transformative. So all of a sudden you have a new market, not just efficiency, but you have a completely new market and a completely new supply base.
And new markets are opening for
new.
Exactly. So new markets are opening up for suppliers who could not go beyond their immediate vicinity, exactly. And now they can actually go beyond. But these startups are also disruptors. Business models using technology are being disrupted, which means that legacy players, many of whom are members of CII, will feel the heat from these young guys.
Yeah. It's very powerful. It's what should happen, and I think what we're actually seeing is many of these startups. By the way, some of the startups are coming out of legacy players. It's the daughter or son of the promoting family of a legacy player who comes back from college somewhere and starts some completely new, vibrant enterprise in some completely unrelated field and does terrific work. So here, I think you see a mix going back and forth. I think it's
the
very
government
productive.
is now playing a role by the Startup India policy, and now even the Stand Up India, which is also bringing some of the marginalized sections of society and inculcating a culture of entrepreneurship in them. What will it take to make this work? Because while it's easy to reduce regulations, you need to do more.
So I really like the way in which the government has initiated the startup program, because they've approached it seems to me, with a single-minded objective, which is how do you reduce the heavy hand of the state on startups. I think that's a terrific way of approaching it. What startups need, they do not need financing from the government, they do not need ideas from the government, they just need the government to be out of the way, right? And that's what they've tried to do with providing various benefits in the form of the startup being out of the tax system for the first 3 or 5 years, able to operate more freely in the first 3 or 5 years. This is exactly what startups need, it seems to me, to get off the ground more quickly and effectively. As far as the Stand Up India program is concerned, again, a very good initiative, because it's so important for inclusiveness. We do a lot of work in CII with Dickey, and that's a very good organization that again does not want any special benefits or advantages.
No.
It just wants access and openness to being dealt with.
The good thing is that they're offering loans and credit without collateral, but again I'll come back to the piece that who's going to guide them and mentor them to become smart businessmen.
So we have a very close working relationship, and it's an institutional relationship where precisely that kind of thing is happening. What we've actually arranged, we found the most productive thing that we can do is to actually arrange buyer-seller meets. So where you actually have many of the enterprises that have been started by entrepreneurs who are members of Dickey, who display what they do. And then we have many CII members who go in and sort of say, okay, so this is what we need this service, so we need these products,
and bring them into the ancillary ecosystem.
Right. And you become a part of the whole supply chain. We found that to be the most productive way to really work together in this area. And again, this is not just good to do. This is good for business. Because if we can operate as a country of 1.3 billion people, where we recruit from 1.3 billion and not some subset, where we deal with all of the enterprises in the country and not just some subset, we're all going to be more efficient.
Finally, Naushad, one quick reaction from you. Where would you like this year, 2016-17, to end? How would you like it to end?
So, one of the things that I recognize as a CII office bearer is that our first role, CII is a terrific organization with an incredibly powerful and committed secretariat. I recognize that the first role of the CII office bearer is to show up. Yeah? So that I have to do. Yeah? Having done that, then there are roles that one can play in terms of providing focus on areas where we hope we can add some value and deliver useful things for the country. So the technology and technical capability area is one. Education, higher education and higher education policy and reform is another. We have an initiative to start a CII university in the course of the year. We have an initiative, for example, to focus on building multinationals, homegrown multinationals. Multinationals with Indian roots who we can enable and help to go around the world. We have an objective to see if we can contribute to changing our trade policy stance from being largely defensive and trying to restrict the access of foreign firms to the Indian market, to being more outward looking and saying, how can we increase access for Indian firms to markets in Latin America or in the Middle East or in Southeast Asia. So I think these are the kinds of, there are 6 sub-themes to our goals for the year, and if we can...
You have a very busy year.
We have a busy year ahead, but it should be a lot of fun, and I think it'll be very fulfilling.
Thank you so much, Naushad, and our best wishes for
Thank you, Pranjal. Thanks a lot.